One. Could this be the end of WoW rating?
Jungi, how you doing?
How are you, Accolonn?
Very good, and you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. First of all, I would like to say I'm a big fan of you.
Thank you very much. Really
Keep
appreciate that.
keep telling it how it is. Don't ever change.
Thank you. I
My
promise I won't. I'm way too old to change.
yeah, same. And my question will be quite long, but I'll try to make it as coherent as possible. Um, Lately, we've seen midwinter pieces leave the professional, race to world first, the
Yeah.
professional scene, racing scene. Uh, could this be a foreshadowing for Blizzard to taking a step back from hardcore catering to hardcore players and focusing on other elements of the game, which we kind of already can witness with the Dragonflight expansion because they introduced some things for casual players.
Already I pretty much understand what the question direction is. I think it's not that complicated to understand what it is. But will Blizzard stop catering to the top 1%? Nope. They will not. Because Blizzard is living in a very short-term mindset, and they think the world first race is gonna keep being decent publicity for them. In my opinion, the world first race hasn't been big publicity since, I mean, maybe BFA, but honestly, Legion. I'm not talking about like how good it is for the players who participate, because they are making money from it, sure, and it's still good money for them. They get sponsored and all that stuff. That's fine. For as far as it goes for Blizzard, though, not really. They didn't even watch the MDI, the last MDI. I barely even heard about it. Like, I know there was one, but I barely heard about it. I don't know if there was one since I quit playing because I was really not in tune. But I'm pretty sure I would have heard about that one as well if there was one. And if I didn't, that's sad. Um, but like the last one I heard was like over a year ago. Then they had the Great Push. Another dumb fucking thing. Again, no one cared. Lizard doesn't know how to capitalize on this shit. They have no idea. They can hire the narrative director and all that stuff, but they have no idea what they're doing in the esports scene at all, in my opinion.
And do you think the professional WoW scene will collapse on itself, or other guilds will take their place and just gonna uh, roll the game to its grave eventually, because it's focused on the race to world first and NDI, which is, in my opinion, a terrible idea because WoW is not an esport, never was designed to be one, and it will never work.
Yeah.
And kind of a attachment to this question, do you think that the focus on the professional aspect of raiding has supercharged the development and the creation of add-ons, combat add-ons, and the collapse of the raiding scene might
Oh, actually, I agree with that. It's a very vicious cycle. It's like the add-ons get better because the fights get harder, and the fight gets hard because the add-ons get better. And it's a very vicious cycle for the players because, and also for the development, and also for the add-on dev guys. I don't like, because right now Blizzard's wasting a lot of time, spending whatever, a lot of times of how to make, how to design a fight so that the add-ons cannot help that fight. Instead of just being like, yo, these add-ons not permitted in raids, done, right? Make a base UI and that is as accessible as ELV UI with weak auras, for as far as UI goes, and make all the other ones not accessible. Just like remove the ability to mod those things, or again, similar thing that I said about Final Fantasy add-ons. Make the add-ons. Anyone who mods an add-on has to go through a certain branch in the development of the game. Send them the add-on so they can internally test, see that this add-on is fair use and fine to use in the game, and it doesn't make anything in the game easier than intended. Like, I know it's not an overnight thing, but like that's the direction they should be going for, in my opinion. Like, some add-ons, in my opinion, are totally fine. Like the ones that like are for appearances and stuff like that, cosmetics, and base UI. But in my opinion, the base UI add-ons are there because the UI add-ons are there because the base UI of Blizzard just sucks ass. If they make a really good UI, you won't need to use the add-ons. And honestly, look, in my opinion, I would love to get rid of Elf UI, to get rid of weak auras, to get rid of Bartender, of Bagnon, anything else. Classic numbers, I mean, it's hard to get rid of that. But I wish that there was an option to like combat text, right? Can't think of anything else. As far as what's it called? Oh, debuffs or whatever. As far as like, and that's just UI, right? I'm not talking about the weak auras that are like the boss mechanics. I'm talking about just like how UI looks and like stuff like that. Just those add-ons, if they're in the base UI, I would love to get rid of all the other add-ons and just make a profile inside of the UI, and that would save to my account and not to my WTF folder. And if that saves to my account, that's online, and then even if I delete all my add-ons, because that happened before, and I come back to the game, I can still have the UI that I set up way before into a profile.
Trim it down a bit to how it was back in the day.
Yeah. Okay, so to start off with the sort of guild question, and top-end guild quitting, it won't automatically or directly lead to the downfall of the raiding scene. I do think that if Blizzard has any intelligence right now, they realize that this is an indication of an incredible flaw within the raid design.
Yes.
Because every single one of the guilds so far that have quit the World First race have quit for exactly the same reason. But
it is
they're...
No, they did not quit because of burnout. A World First Raider did not quit because of burnout. They quit on because, well, I mean, depends how you define burnout in the sense, but it's like the reason you would quit the World First is not burnout. The reason you would quit World First is because it's not feasible to compete with people who get sponsored, with people who can take the month off to prog, people who have the time to level multiple alts and do multiple split runs to be relevant for the World First. Normal people cannot do that at all. It is impossible, right? To take a month off, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people in your guild can. Not all 20. Good luck with that. And like a lot of people who would have the skill to participate cannot, just because of that barrier to entry, which is time. The burnout, in my opinion, is like maybe like reason number 5, burnout. I'm tired of running multiple dungeons of the same dungeon on multiple characters, and doing split heroic runs, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, I can see the burnout in that. Though honestly, when you have a strong goal in mind, I don't think you ever care about these things. It's like during Legion, my goal was to have the most AP on my server on Zul'jin, and I did for like 2 minutes. And like I saw the competition, like it was me and another paladin were competing on that AP in Zul'jin. And this is the funniest thing. when I took over a look at like Illidan, I was like a few millions away from number one on Illidan. On Zul'jin, however, I was number one for 2 minutes on AP grind. And trust me, I don't even remember what I was doing for AP grind, because all I cared about getting more AP. Did I do more runs? Maybe. Did I do just like all the world quests all the time? I don't even know what else gave AP. Whatever, like I did all the rare hunts, I believe. Fuck, I don't even know. But this is like 7.0, like literally like a week and a half into the game. And then I realized that AP doesn't give matter for shit, because one reset and you can make a massive jump, and grinding it out was kind of useless. But while I was actually into the grind, like into, my goal was being like the highest AP grinder, I didn't care what I was doing. So I highly doubt people who are doing like, or their goal is to be a world first, cutting edge, they don't care about the grind and the burnout. I would say it's mostly the accessibility.
They're done. They can't justify spending weeks trying to get bosses down because there's just too many bosses.
It's not feasible anymore.
Yeah. Look, it was fine back in the day before there was such a thing as an official world first race, because yes, you would always have your top 10, top 100 guilds really try harding to get the boss down. And to be fair, it was fun, it was good, it was cool, but there was no monetary incentive to be first, or to be second, or to be third. Now that there is a monetary incentive, a lot of these guilds are pushing themselves beyond
money is the killer of passion.
What we would consider to be healthy in order to get there first. And now is when the real problems of Blizzard's hardcore element of raid design is coming to fruition, which is why I sort of said in during Twitch. So on Twitch, someone asked a very similar question, and my idea there was keep raids large, because a lot of people love the idea of having 12 bosses in a raid, this large cathedral sort of thing with the bosses strong.
If he's going to the suggestion of dividing into patches, I can't say I agree.
And you work.
I mean, I agree, but I also don't agree for another reason. But let's see if that's what he's going for.
Your way to the final boss. So keep that for normal, keep that for heroic, but then in mythic.
Oh, okay, he's doing the boss rush thing. Never mind then.
Take 4 or 5 bosses from the raid, the most iconic bosses from the raid, and that is.
I would say the bridge bosses, the ones who are like open the next zone. So, for example, you'd have Lady Nerva is the main boss of the West Wing. Council is the main boss. This is like from Castle Nathria. You have Lady Nerva, you have the Council, and then you have the last 3 bosses, which is like the charging guy, whatever, the giant, the generals, and then the last boss. That's 5 bosses. Honestly, can you skip the charging guy? Yes, but if you're gonna go for 4 or 5, I say those are the 5 that you would use. There's no reason to have any of the other bosses, and again, make it cosmetic.
Is the mythic world first race, so that's like the hardest
boss rush. Yeah, no trash, nothing.
Those
just
5
those
bosses. They don't drop any gear. They are basically item level locked. They drop a bunch of cosmetic rewards, but that's the world first race. That's the hardest content in the game. It means that guilds are going to spend at most a week or 2 trying to get all the bosses down. It's short enough that it works for a world first race in sort of an esports content or context, but no.
I don't mind if they can do it in a week or 2. For all I care, it can be 3 months. And 3 months, if in 3 months, if a world first guild can let me rephrase that. In 3 months, even a guild that is not part of the world first race might be able to beat a world first raider, because what they can do is they can look at the strategies that people are used to kill certain bosses, okay? Because people will be streaming it, and if they're actually better players, they have a lot more time. Right? If the bosses are actually like that hard, who would have the advantage? Still, obviously, the world first raiders. But because it can be spread out for so long, And because the bosses are that hard, people can catch up on gear, and it will be a lot more matter of skill rather than just gear. But again, let's be real, World First Raiders will probably win regardless.
Not so long,
Or
so
sponsored.
exclusive or needed that everyone has to partake in it. I think that's sort of the best of both worlds, because technically I would prefer World of Warcraft going more the Final Fantasy route. In Final Fantasy XIV, there is one raid per expansion. The raid opens up 4 bosses every second patch.
See, the reason I don't agree with this is because WoW's story expands with each patch. Final Fantasy, okay, well, that's not true. I mean, it's true for Final Fantasy 2, but it's like the raid in Final Fantasy really connects to the main MSQ. Okay, the Allied raid somewhat connects to the MSQ, to what we were talking about, or like there will be some connection to the MSQ. The problem is in WoW, the raid is directly connected to the content patch. Now, in Final Fantasy, that is not true. So, for example, we'll take Endwalker right now, right? So it's like you have the raid Asphodelis. Asphodelis, Jesus Christ, is Asphodelis? Fuck, I don't remember. Anyways, the name no, it doesn't matter. Current raid of the raid has to do with Alpis, right? And going back in time thing. However, the second part of the raid will still have to do with Alpis, even though our MSQ is going in a completely other direction. So the rest of the raid in Alpis will have almost nothing to do with the MSQ for Final Fantasy, and I believe this was true for what do you call it, Deltascape. I believe this is true for Eden, right? Like there was nothing really happening. There was some correlation between the content patch of Eden and the MSQ up until I believe 5.3, 5.3 or 6.3, or let's see. Heaven's Words 3, yeah, so 5.3, when basically we sent back Thancred and Urianger and like whatever, we sent them back to the source, and there was a little goodbye there during the raid, but the rest of the raid had nothing to do with what was going on. So like the last 4 bosses of the raid had absolutely nothing to do with what was going on in the MSQ, which was the whole like the pylons, the corrupting pawns or whatever that had to do with Endwalker at that point, right? So the main raid there, the one raid per expansion, usually only has to do with the end of the MSQ, not so much with the rest of the MSQ in patch content. So usually, so that's why I don't really agree with like the one raid per expansion. I think WoW is better to do the 3 raids. However, you do have filler bosses that I don't think you need to have. You can easily make some of the bosses have just more HP and have the mechanics of another boss and completely remove the other boss. Like, I don't think you need to have 12, 13 bosses. Especially when like 4 to 5 of them are completely too easy, undertuned, but then you have 3 or 4 that are completely overtuned and are like a pain in the ass, and it's like you kill them once on Mythic and you never want to see them again because of how annoying it is to do that boss. So yeah.
So you'll get one patch, you'll get 4 bosses. This is one wing of the raid opening up. There's an entire storyline for that wing that you play through and you kill all 4 of the bosses. And then you have to wait 2 patches before the next wing opens up and the next part of the story opens up. However, it's usually raid, alliance raid, raid, alliance raid, raid, alliance raid, right? So there's a new raid or new 4 bosses every patch. It's just alternating between the alliance raid and the normal raid. The alliance raid is for catch up, and then at the end of the expansion you have the full raid that is now unlocked for everyone to do. And then in between that they also launch trials, extreme trials and stuff like that. And then now they also launched an ultimate. So there's a bunch of content there, but it's much more condensed, as it were. It's not 12 bosses at once. It's more 4 bosses, you go in, you enjoy yourself, and then you're done. So I can...
The only reason, sorry, not the only, main reason I like the Final Fantasy more than I like the World of Warcraft Fantasy is because I can choose which boss to fight pretty much instantly. No trash, instant, like not instant, but like a queue into the boss I want. If it's Savage, a group into the boss I want. Right? It's like, it's not like you have to look for a specific save in WoW and also not be saved to the boss. In WoW, it's like they make it so hard to, like, dude, I just want to kill the 4th boss on Mythic difficulty. I just want to farm that guy out, and that's it, because my raid team cleared it and we are never going back to it because we're in prog and we're saving the progression. Therefore, if you wanted a certain piece of equipment from a different boss, well, tough titty, you're not gonna get it. I can't even go and grind it because if I try and kill that boss, and I do, I'm saved and I can't do the raid with my raid team. That is so fucking annoying. That is so dumb. There's no reason to do that. Final Fantasy, you just queue into the boss. Technically, if Final Fantasy went the route of 3 raids with 12 bosses each instead of 4, I think it would be just as good as it is now. I think it would be harder for them to make good fights though, because it's a lot more bosses. But if let's say they could have made all the fights just as good as they are now, there would not be a problem. You would have key bosses you're aiming for, and like people, and you would always find a group for one of the bosses that you need, or you can queue into it. But the only thing is, the way gear works in Final Fantasy, there's no need to do that many bosses for gear because they all drop the token that you want.
Absolutely see that. Well, Korax, I don't count the Alliance raid as a raid because it's more a catch-up raid, which is why I said there's just one real hardcore raid, like what we would consider in this context as being a hardcore raid, which is the raid.
The Allied raid is, I would say, kind of LFR difficulty, but you can't really AFK. Like you can wipe, you can just AFK or brain dead like you can in what's called in WoW. It's just that the mechanics in Allied raids are usually a lot more apparent and it's easier to understand the mechanics. Allied raids make it a very good way to teach you mechanics and the raid environment, versus like LFR doesn't teach you shit, just like shows you this is what the boss looks like and here's the story.
Raid is a catch-up raid, so it's still bosses, but it's not the raid. It's not the hardcore part of the game.
Also, if you think about it that way, it's like LFR is equivalent to Allied raids in a sense, so I think Allied raids are better overall. Normal raid in WoW and normal raid in Final Fantasy are approximately the same. I would say honestly the normal raid in WoW can be harder, but well, no, not really, because you don't have an item level requirement to go into a normal raid, so you can be under geared, whereas in Final Fantasy you have an item level requirement to queue into the raid. So in that regard, I would say maybe Final Fantasy normal raids are actually harder because you do need certain gear already. If you could go in without that gear, I don't think you could beat some of the bosses. Okay, but approximately I would say they are technically kind of the same. Then the Savage raid, aside from the first boss, as far as I've seen, I would say the Savage raid is equivalent to the end, like the last fights of Heroic. Maybe mid Mythic, but like mostly the Heroic. And the reason I'm saying that is because I don't find Savage to be hard. The first 3 bosses. The 4th boss, in my opinion, is full on an appropriate Mythic fight. Okay. The last boss looks a lot more hard, a lot more challenging, a lot more demanding of the player compared to the first 3. The first 3 is like literally kind of like learning a dance. The fourth one is learning a dance, but it also has a lot of hard checks and a lot of like fast being on your feet and knowing where to go without any indication. With the first three, there is some indication. There's time to react, a lot of time to react, in my opinion, for a majority of the fights. For like the biggest things in the fight, there's plenty of time to react, plenty of time to do the mechanics. On the fourth one, there wasn't. You needed to know the fight like by heart, and it's also a very long fight. Plus, it's a door boss, so it's technically two bosses with a checkpoint. Yeah.
And then the ultimates is 4 bosses that you do. It's about a 20-minute.
Ultimate fights, in my opinion, are Mythic Plus rating. I don't think I've seen any Mythic raid boss aside from maybe Kill Jaden that is anywhere near equivalent to any ultimate
fight, which is the hardest content according to many in video games. But I do think so. On that note, the 12 boss system or the 10 boss system is unsustainable for a world first race. It simply can't work. The question we then have to ask ourselves is, should Blizzard adapt their content in order to keep the hardcore audience going, right? So give the world first raiders something to do, or should Blizzard not give a fuck about the world first raiders, because ultimately the world first raiders makes up maybe 0.01% of the player base? This sort of depends on where you fall.
A lot less than that.
Because I do think having that super hardcore element within the game is cool. People love watching the world first races, and it gives a lot of ordinary raiders something to aspire to, even if they know they're never actually going to get there. It's still a nice thing to think about. So I don't think that it should be removed overall. I do think that the fact that you have so many of these top-end guilds now quitting spells the end of it naturally. So unless Blizzard steps in and does something about it, the end for hardcore raiding is very near. Because these are the players that is more committed than anyone else to doing this content. And if they start quitting because fuck it, I don't care, well, what do you think ultimately happens as a result of this?
I agree with that 100%.
What was the second part of your question again?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it in the lobby before I came here. Is that the creation and the development of combat add-ons was kind of supercharged by the fact that there is now a professional, like there's money involved basically.
Yeah.
And it's got kind of supercharged the arms race between Blizzard creating the raids and the raiders like trying to overcome these raids.
So
and,
I don't.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. I don't necessarily think that. Of course, add-ons would become more complex with need, and since these guilds have a lot of need, these add-ons has to be a lot more complex. But if you look at what most of these top-end guilds do, a lot of them don't actually use things like DBM as a priority. Most of them have weak auras, and they have literal people who build weak auras for every single version of the fight. Because the thing is, a lot of these guilds tend to do the raids before the add-ons are even perfect, so they can't really rely on a DBM or a bigwigs to actually help them with these fights, because a lot of the time these add-ons are sort of based on their own kills. So, once they manage to do it, the add-on will finally sort of be upgraded to the point where it needs to be. So I don't necessarily think I don't think raiding is the problem. Like I don't think the world first raiding is the reason for these. So for example, even back in the day, and we were nowhere near a world first guild, but we were good enough that usually as soon as Mythic opened, we would start clearing Mythic bosses, because me and my guild would one-shot normal and heroic in one night. So then the only thing that's left is Mythic raiding. And even for us, usually the first month or month and a half of the raid, DBM and Bigwigs would be broken. Like, it would track certain things not at all, and certain things it would track completely wrong. So we would usually also use things like weak auras, just bold a weak aura to track the ability, instead of trying to rely on an add-on that is just not working at the moment. And those guilds are much better than us. So when they do this, those add-ons are nowhere near ready to carry it. So I would say probably
Fair
not.
enough.
That would be my response to it. I don't think the raiding scene can be blamed for a lot of things, but not for add-on bloat. Because ultimately, the people that rely on these add-ons far more aren't really the top-end guilds. It is your sort of heroic guilds that think that they're world-first guilds. They're the ones who overly rely on add-ons to get the bosses down. Do you have any retort to that, or anything you want to add to that?
No, thank you for your answers. I was kind of thinking more or less the same. I think the hardcore, as you said, the hardcore raiding scene is necessary in this game because it gives people kind of a upper goal to reach towards to. Like,
That's fine,
back
yeah.
in the day, people were looking at
Doesn't have to be gear though.
Geared
be cosmetics.
people standing on mailboxes and we
Mounts, mugs,
Oh yeah.
mugs, whatever.
So thank you very much for taking the time to answer the questions.
Oh, it's
forward
fine.
to maybe asking some other, maybe next time.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, every single week we're here. So if you ever think of any other question, you're more than welcome to ask it. Someone else said earlier in chat, how do you ask me questions? Very, very simple. You go onto Discord, there is a Q&A section on Discord. You write your question into the Q&A. If I don't get to it 1 week, I'll definitely get to it the next week. Morny and Andy can actually provide you with your place in the queue. So they can tell you, listen here, most likely not next week, most likely the week after that. You're number 11 or 12 in the queue, depending on where you are. We do favor people that actually show up in voice. So if you want to make sure that your question gets asked, jump into the voice chat, join and actually ask your question, because that is what's favored. Otherwise, you can just write it there, and we have a system to make sure that we don't miss any questions. And if I've already answered the question, the mods will absolutely link you to my answer so that you can see what my answer was to the question. I want to thank all of you for coming out, by the way. That is our 2 hours up for the night, actually 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's been an absolute pleasure to once again have all of you here, to spend some time with all of you. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging out with me, for spending your afternoon, your morning with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cool. Yeah, the raid design, well, in my opinion, again, the 12 bosses, I think it's fine. But if they're making some bosses just for the sake of making 12 bosses, and like only caring about 3 or 4, then there's no reason. Just give us 3 or 4, whatever. But I don't think Final Fantasy raiding is superior in quality. It's like the convenience and the accessibility is by far superior, but like bosses wise, I think they're just very different, and I think both are okay. Okay. Do I have any manga to read? Read this, read that. Now reading this for a bit, now reading this for a bit. Yeah, I think I read everything. Yep. Alright, sweet. Alright. Cool. Let's go on to gaming finally. Finally.